Ahoy! Season 2, Blood of the Sands, has an official date, and it's much sooner than I expected. I thought they're gonna have a bit of a delay. It's dropping tonight, in a couple of hours. So we're gonna do this a little bit differently from the usual. And first I'm gonna show you the new Twitch drop. This is a skin you can get on Twitch now by watching Twitch streams that have the drop enabled. But along with that, we have a massive amount of patch notes, and we have some new changes that haven't been in previous ones. So we'll go to that in a reasonable pace in order to cover all of it. So, the main changes that we're getting with the new season is the new season story. It's great, play it. It's also very worth it to play it for Sandworm gear, so nice things there in general. There is a new season pass with new season journey, the same thing as season 1, but new rewards along with that as well. And especially important here is there are some transmog tokens, even on the free track. And then we have transmog, but this is coming in a mid-season update. This is not coming right at the start of the season, so we'll see when exactly this comes out, but before season 3 and after the release of season 2. Then we have the Elite Trial, the 20-man raid, Arena of Shaneshan. I've talked about that plenty already. Later today I'll be releasing the guide for that. We also have the second season trial, which is the Hatchery, a 10-man raid that is a lot easier in comparison. By the way, I should also mention that Shaneshan is significantly harder than on the PTR version. Got a bunch of buffs. I don't think he's been defeated on the new version at all so far because it's only available on the New World War server. So both of these things worth trying out depending on your level of expertise. Basically, Hatchery is for everyone. You don't even need to be 600 gear score, I think, technically. And Arena is for the ones that are more prepared. And we have the new Heart Rune, which drops from Shaneshan, the Devourer Heart Rune. Then we have a PvP track update with a lot more rewards, a lot better rewards in general. So worth looking at if you are grinding PvP. And that comes, it's not mentioned here, it's probably mentioned later, with a new arena map as well. So that is great to progress this track. Then we have raid groups, which are basically just a new setting, but that works both in PvE as well as OPR. So this is super good for OPR, where you can now see all the players on the map. OPR also gets some changes in general. From what I've heard from people who have played it, I couldn't because of my ping and because of the time zones. They said the changes don't really feel that significant. But we have cross-world OPR along with that, so that should be cool. You'll see a lot of new players if you're playing on NA or EU between the different servers. First Light is basically removed for now. There's a full explanation on what's happening here if you're wondering about your items and stuff, so you can read that if you're interested in the details, but generally there's a wall around it now because it will become the new zone in the expansion. Then there's the mention of 3v3 arenas. I already mentioned that. Very cool new map. They unfortunately didn't seem to do any changes to the stairs, which were a bit of a problem, but we'll see how that turns out on good ping. Definitely worth trying out. Very fun. I like it a lot, and I hope it will keep Arena a bit more alive, even though I think they're going to be switching between both versions of Arena a little bit. We have a ton of quest fixes here. Not going to go over that. Same with some brimstone fixes, some general notable fixes, just tons of stuff as usual, as you would expect in such patch notes. There are some expedition fixes, most of them are also more minor aspects, but one that I think is very notable is that Captain Thorpe was still able to hit players behind him, and that should be fully fixed now. Ton of world AI fixes here as well. One is notable here is Sir Juni. The duplicate spawn is gone, so it's going to be harder to farm the human Bane major material. Weapon weights have been changed. No idea why that's under combat changes, but it's great because they take up less space in your inventory. Flare and Mortar Charge now deals stamina damage to blocking players, which comes with a new block change. We'll get to that in a second. But also, players have 10% increased base HP across all levels. This is compensating for the removal of the Hail and Hardy town buff. There is no mention of Stalwart getting the same compensation, though it is possible that we actually have slower stamina recovery now, because stamina recovery from Stalwart is also removed, with Stalwart as a buff, as a town buff being removed. The non-combat int perk is completely irrelevant, it's just exhaust cost. And players now leave combat after 10 seconds after a combat action, and 1 second after killing the final enemy they were in combat with. This is great for testing things. You can just swap things a lot more quickly. Now we get to the new blocking here. One-handed and magic weapons can now block 50% of the damage of a ranged attack, and the other 50% is stamina damage. For two-handed weapons, this is 30% of the range damage just going through as damage, while 70% is blocked. Shields work as before, but the movement speed while blocking is increased slightly, and if you are exhausted from block break, not from dodging, just from block break, then you will no longer be slowed. You can walk at normal speed. The Blunderbuss mainly gets a variety of fixes. One that is notable is that it can no longer stack all stacks of Empowering Breaker in a single shot. And it gets a range increase by 1 meter to Blast Shot, which I think is fair enough. The Blundy had a few small nerfs, and Blast Shot I think was hit as well. And just a slight range increase. Especially at that range, you're not going to hit all pellets or anything anyways, I think, so that's okay. The bow gets so many changes that basically this warrants its own video. What's important here is that especially Rain of Arrows gets just a ton of buffs at once. This animation speed, bleed damage, cooldown, time until the arrows actually come down, and the radius, so that's a very big one. This could actually be an interesting ability in some scenarios now. And there's a big shuffle going on in the left tree. So Dodge and Weave only triggers while you're at full stamina now. That's going to take down the damage a little bit, rather the escapability. So that's a benefit for anyone chasing a bow user, which was it's still going to be very difficult, but it's slightly less difficult now. And then Knee Shot is now Rending Headshot, but Evasive Tactics becomes the ultimate in place of Knee Shot. So if you want to have Evasive Tactics still, you have to go full into that tree, and then in the same place you now have a Rending Headshot, which gives you a 10% rend for 3 seconds on headshot, it says here, but it's actually increased to 5 seconds. So yeah, it's going to feel fairly different overall, but left tree should be interesting in some ways. We'll see how it plays out. Fire Stuff again gets a couple of fixes, and then one major change here is Incinerate. So the recovery of the attack is reduced, which in itself is already pretty impactful because it has a very long recovery at the moment. Along with that, the pushback was removed from the ability, but a stagger was added, which isn't necessarily bad, right? Because enemies stay closer to you, which you may sometimes want if you're going into a flamethrower build, which you often do if you're picking Incinerate in the first place. The damage is reduced from 150% to 125% to account for the added stagger, which is a very low value overall. So I find it very difficult to place this without knowing how the stagger will actually feel, how long it is, how long the recovery is now, and all that. Because, like, looking at Pillar of Fire, that still does more damage even with a 10% nerf, now 155%. So it's a bit weird, but we'll see how it plays out. They also have obviously different effects surrounding them. The Great Axe has the execute timing changed slightly, with the hitbox appearing 2 frames later and lasting 2 additional frames, so a bit harder to hit, but the cooldown is reduced from 25 to 20 seconds. Whirlwind once again gets significant buffs. The block, dodge, and cancel window after the first spin is now possible instead of doing that after the second spin. The movement speed is increased by 15% while the ability is active, and the rotation of the Whirlwind is increased by 20%, which I think also means that it hits quicker more often. Reap also has the first hit damage increased from 60 to 80%, kind of going back a little bit on those CC ability damage nerfs. So interesting changes overall. I really hope we can see some Whirlwind in action more. Greatsword gets a fix, so the stances should actually last more properly now, which is pretty important. And then there is the adjusted to the Greatsword range deflection passive to reduce block stamina damage instead of decreasing it. I'm interpreting this as currently you take more stamina damage and you get a range block, and I guess that's not going to be very valuable now because now everyone has a range block anyways. So I think what this means is now with the ranged block, if you get the range deflection perk, you'll take less stamina damage from ranged attacks instead. At least that's what I'm assuming based on this wording. It's a bit confusing. The base damage of the Greatsword itself is decreased by 4%, which is pretty significant. I think, especially with other changes coming this patch, the Greatsword is going to fall out of favor a fair bit more, though it will still be used in expeditions for the AoE swings. But even there are now other options that may be more appealing because, again, pretty heavy hit here overall. Whirring Rupture increased the power of the Fortify from 8 to 10% per stack, increasing the duration from 5 to 7 seconds. I've been saying this from the start, if they nerf the Greatsword in terms of damage, they need to add utility. They're doing this here, but in an incredibly minor amount. It's like 6% extra Fortify, and Fortify was recently nerfed, so this is not very much at all. This is not very impactful. The duration increase is probably a bit more significant, but then you might also switch off weapon, and then you're not going to keep it for longer anyways. So yeah, I think the Greatsword with the nerfs that it's getting really needs more utility. It's kind of lacking in that department. We'll see what happens down the line. Scabbard Slash gets a upgrade nerf to Skyfall Sword, reducing the radius of the ground impact hitbox from 3 to 2 meters from impact point, and adjusted the circular shockwave VFX to align with that, to visually represent that. That is a massive nerf. This doesn't sound that big, but a radius nerf from 3 to 2 meters is very impactful. This was on PTR and it feels so much smaller. I always hated Skyfall Sword in the first place, so it's not really a big deal for me. But it is something that's probably going to be fairly relevant in PvP when you just kind of lock onto someone and then kind of follow them, but you may still miss because the radius is not very small. They did a fix for the Hatchet, fixing the transition between Hatchet's social distancing and the aimed throw. Problem is, they forgot to do it for the rending throw. At least they don't mention it here. It was not on PTR, so I don't know if it's now maybe done or if it's still a problem. I reported it either way. Infected Throw had a damage increase from 120 to 140%. Rending Throw had its rend increased from 10 to 20%. Very nice. And Raging Torrent can now block cancel at the same time it can dodge cancel. Once again, many block changes in this patch. And there's also an issue with the tracking not properly updating, so it should hit more consistently now. Again, not that many people using Raging Torrent though. Social distancing, much more important change here, which may actually make Raging Torrent more interesting as well. The distance condition on the route for the stay back upgrade is removed, so this works at any range now, which means you can essentially throw this at someone there, immediately rooted, no matter where, and maybe follow that up with a Raging Torrent directly or with a Feral Rush first and then do the double root. But yeah, kind of interesting. There's an Ice Gauntlet change that was very misunderstood. So Ice Pylon will now be destroyed if the Ice Gauntlet is unequipped. That doesn't mean weapon swap. That means fully unequipped, taken off your gear, put into your inventory. So Ice Pylon is still active when you're on your other weapon. It's not nearly as big of a nerf as some people thought it was. Wind Chill got a grid on the base ability now instead of the perk, and the damage is increased from 20 to 24% weapon damage per tick. Wind Chill is such a sleeper ability in some ways now. Very interesting, I'll talk about that in the future, but yeah, Wind Chill is fantastic in some ways. Maybe not in PvP, we'll see about that, but Wind Chill will have its time now. Blocking Stamina finally gets a nerf. One that I've been just banging on since release. Because of the range changes that you can now block range damage, they're actually doing it. They're reducing the stamina gain from 15 to 10 and increase the mana cost from 3 to 5. Mana cost largely irrelevant. The major part here is the stamina gain. Because beforehand, anything that did less than 15 stamina damage, which are a lot of things, would actually refill your stamina, give you more stamina back. And only the very heavy attacks that just break through most of your stamina would actually be able to take it down. Now with 10, the threshold is a lot more lenient. I think it's still a very strong blocking passive. It's absolutely going to be useful still, but a bit more reasonable, especially now that it can also block ranged attacks. I think this is very important, because ranged attacks especially would otherwise just constantly refill it. Lifestaff actually had the wrong patch notes beforehand, but they fixed it now because I was kind of confused about that one. So Light's Embrace, the healing per buff is increased from 15 to 20%, very nice. And Orb of Protection's Fortify is increased from 10 to 20 seconds, but the duration is reduced from 20 to 10 seconds, which is fine because you're going to use it often enough if it's in your build. And the Fortify increase here offsets the general nerfs to Fortify. Well, it doesn't fully offset it, but it targets to offset that somewhat. The real big deal here was Splash of Light, which had a complete overhaul, but they reverted that based on the feedback because they were worried that you could heal an entire raid with Splash of Light, but they were able to sort that out in a different way. So the nerf that was coming originally is no longer coming through. Instead, we have the healing being increased from 60 to 80% of the weapon damage now. So I guess just a buff in that way. And the shared recovery update has the mana gain increased from 5 to 15%. So yeah, just small buffs to the lifestaff ultimately, and none of the nerfs that we had previously. The Musket had an update to the crosshair to make it easier to see during combat. I couldn't really figure out what this is on PTR, maybe it's like a small outline or something, but oh well. More importantly, Power Shot and Powder Burn are getting upgrades that make them no longer require a dedicated reload. So you can just press the button and it's like a steroid on your next attack, basically. A toggle, not a toggle, you cannot deactivate it, but it preloads that into your next attack without doing the whole reload animation, so that is absolutely fantastic. Makes the Musket feel a lot smoother overall. And this is also including shooter stance, so you can combo your stuff in various ways. And the cooldown activation is now starting when the shot is fired rather than when it's loaded, which makes sense in the context of how the things generally work and how other abilities work too, right? If you have an effect on a weapon, you use the ability with the attack, and then the cooldown will go off, so you can't just double preload, basically. When it comes to Sword and Shield, we have a ridiculous amount of changes. First, some changes that are just fixes, basically. It's some adjustment to a specific weapon. And we have some fixes to shields. But then when we come to the abilities here, Whirling Blade was changed again from the first PTR version, which was maybe too strong. Maybe that's why they did it. I'm not quite sure. Or maybe this is just a different split somehow. I don't know. This could have various different effects. So the attack has been sped up. Whirling Blade now hits twice for 80 damage each. Before it was 145% scaling. They upped that to 160%, but it was in a single spin. But I guess now you can kind of avoid the second part of the hit if you're quick. But then I'm also not sure if it maybe staggers or what happens in terms of movement on the second hit. Yeah, so very unclear on that so far. We'll have to see how it's actually on the live server, because none of this was on PTR. And the per hit cooldown reduction from Tactical Strike is reduced from 10 to 5% to compensate for that. The hitbox is also increased. It's still not massive, but noticeably bigger. And there's additional time to redirect the attack during the startup, which the question is if that is also for the second attack individually or not, or is it just a double hit? I don't know. And then the opportunity upgrade, the power of the rend is increased from 5% to 15%, so it's actually a valuable rend to have now. Sandworm, by the way. So yeah, very nice, very good. I'll be running Whirling Blade for Sandworm. Actually useful, and I also think it felt good in PvP. We'll have to see what this means for it in PvP, but we'll find out. Reverse Step gets a similar treatment, slightly sped up attack animation, improved the homing or adjusted the homing for the updated attack speed, slightly increased the hitbox size, and additional time to redirect the attack during the startup because it kind of locked you in place as well. Very, very nice. Should feel a lot smoother as well. I have not experimented with Reverse Step as much. I figured I'm going to do that on live when the ping is good. Defiant Stance added the functionality to reduce the attacker's stamina damage while active by 20%, so very nice. Get some benefit for blocking immediately after using it as well. And make it so that the buff is applied earlier in the animation and reduce the recovery of the attack, because it took forever to actually go into Defiant Stance, which was often a risk in itself. The defensive formation AoE is increased from 3 meters to 4 meters. Again, radius increases are very, very significant if it's just 1 meter. So this could be pretty interesting. I mean, it's already used in Wars, so I could see it being used in Wars more and maybe OPR more as well. And Shield Rush gets a change to the recovery of the extra animation that is played by the upgrade by 7 frames. I haven't actually tested if this means it can be cancelled properly into Shield Bash with the upgrade. I'll find out soon. The Opportunist upgrade, the Opportunist passive rather, only deals increased damage to abilities now against slow targets, no longer to light attacks, because of the other buffs the sword is getting, so they don't want it to be like overbearing, and I think that is fair enough, to be honest. Speaking of things that are overbearing, have you heard of Cyclone? This ability is crazy now. Increased the damage from 130% to 165%. Spear guide coming very, very soon. I've already made a basic spear guide, basically, where I talk about one specific build for Sandworm. If you're interested in that, that's on my channel already. But I will make a more detailed guide for various new spear builds very soon as well. The attack here has been sped up as well, and the hitbox has been extended as well. This thing is just a beast now. Cyclone is likely going to be used in both builds. I did the math in the other video where I talked about that, but yeah, very, very good. And also added a dodge block cancel window after the second attack of Perforate, so it's not quite as static anymore. Still after the second attack, so it's still a bit of lock in there, a bit of punishment if you're not careful, but at least you're a bit safer with it too, so that's nice. I predict that Spear will generally be one of the most valuable weapons that we'll have in this patch, really. For the Void Gauntlet, the cleansing, or the harvest itself triggers a little bit quicker now once you start the animation. For some reason they added the Void Blade grid node again, that's already in the game, so no idea what's going on there. The real big deal here, Baleful Tether. It remains active when swapping to your secondary weapon. So you can benefit from all of the effects while on another weapon, which felt like this was always how it was supposed to be. I'm generally not a fan of abilities lingering when you switch weapons, like Ice Gauntlet has too much of that. But I think in case of Baleful Tether, it makes a lot of sense and it's fair, because that's just kind of the only way that this ability really makes sense. When spinning your camera with Warhammer, you are no longer double hit. Very important fix in terms of balance. And there are adjustments to Mighty Gavel and Armor Breaker. So Mighty Gavel gets the timing of the hitbox changed so that it appears 1 frame sooner. Not sure how much that will change. Slightly increase the impact area of the attack, could be interesting in PvE if you want to hit multiple mobs. And reworked Justice for All to give Mighty Gavel to reduce Mighty Gavel's cooldown by 50%. This was previously a double hit, then they turned it into having basically 2 charges of the attack. Now it's just a 50% cooldown reduction. And then Armor Breaker has its damage increased from 140 to 160%, so arguably just the better ability of the two anyways. Slightly smaller radius though, of course. And increased the power of the Rend from lasting trauma from 20 to 30%. It's just... get this. This is a lot. This is very good. And Opening Act also works against targets above 70% health now, and not just against targets, you know, with full health, I think it was. So much, much better, actually worth speccing into Armor Breaker. Lot of pain. Very good. But if you want even more pain, the Rapier is right here. Flurry is now getting its damage evenly distributed across all hits instead of escalating. The damage is being adjusted according to that, like from 47 to 83 beforehand to just 60% per stab. And the ability also has grit. And the homing is also improved to be consistent and probably line up the attacks. So this thing has grit, hits harder more consistently, and also hits easier. It has better aim. Yeah, that's very strong. That's very, very, very strong in PvE, where the Rapier is already very strong. And it's also very strong in PvP, so maybe in certain combos, Flurry could now be used as a PvP ability. Who knows? The Tondo gets a change to proper spacing. The condition is now changed from the radius, or the distance that you had beforehand, to now being applied against targets with a bleed. I feel like this is a bit weird because you're kind of using Tondo to apply the bleed first, so it might be a bit of a nerf, depending, but it's not the worst thing in the world, and the Flurry buffs are so good that, yeah, whatever, even if it was a nerf, fine. Invigorate and Punishment will only apply to abilities now. I thought this was actually in the last patch already, but it's in here. Again, maybe I'm mixing things up. Thwarting Strikes can now roll on Void Gauntlets. And then there are a variety of fixes here. The ones that are standing out to me are the ones about the amulets. Empowered would constantly refresh and extend the duration beyond intended durations, whereas Alacrity, Empowered, and Fortified did not extend the duration as intended at all. So those should be fixed now. Well, I don't know how it's working with Empowered because it's mentioned twice, but yeah, generally these perks should be working as intended now. In War, attackers can now purchase siege weapons without issues, and invasions have had an overhaul. There are now 10 minutes prior to the battle starting, and the total time for the waves is 25 minutes. I have watched this, and they said they've increased the difficulty of early waves to smoothly ramp the challenge over time. I couldn't play it myself, but I watched multiple runs of it, and I did not see any notable difference other than it being 5 minutes shorter. I think invasions need more than just that, both from a challenging perspective, but also from a time consumption perspective, because it just still takes forever. You just have less of a break between the waves, and that's about it. Not a fan of these changes so far. We have a variety of fixes to Outpost Rush first of all, but we also have some more targeted changes. So siege weapons have their defensive and damage capabilities increased by 20%, and the base ranged thrust damage resistant for all gates has been increased by roughly 30%. So gates are a bit of an awkward one now, we'll see about that. The Corrupted Portal event has been changed to actually be an event. So you have to kill all the enemies, and then you get a Brute Summon token when you close the portal. There's on a 5-minute timer, so people will fight over this, and there's no Azoth Bank there anymore. Summons can now be farmed directly from various mobs, so Alpha Wolf gives you Bear Summons, Argent Dove gives you Spectre Summons, and the Portal gives you the Brutes. The Baroness has been changed to now have like a gate kind of like at the entrance of OPR, where you have to go through this wall by interacting with it, so you can't shoot from outside of the wall and still steal the kill with a musket. There are some score adjustments, AI adjustments here especially, and then also point capture adjustments. Blocking adds to your personal score. Now this is going to be a bit weird because you can also block poorly and still get score for it. And less score for damage. So overall they kind of want to incentivize playing more to the objective. You will also only drop half of your resources on death. Not really sure what that one's about, because that's actually kind of an advantage if you die with half your resources and then you go straight to the place where you want to drop them though, so meh. So we have the new arena, the new 3v3 arena. They say that it will be on a 2-week rotation. I wish they didn't do that at the start at least, so the people that want to run Sandworm have the chance to run the new arena right after that. But yeah, generally much nicer. There are also different rewards now. First arena is completed, now award you with 1 extra weapon or armor each. These are the same as OPR. No idea why they're only doing for the first 2, but oh well. The Azoth, Assault, and PvP XP rewards have also been increased based on the number of rounds won each match. So I guess that's kind of where they want the value to be, that you can just get through the track faster if you win a lot. Overall, definitely worth playing the new map. Open world PvP actually has more changes than are listed here, because you have consistent PvP XP and Azoth Salt gains of 800 now. So that's fine, always after 10 minutes of active PvP. No more scaling in that regard. But it says weapons and armor that can drop from open world PvP now have PvP perks on them. But it goes beyond that, because you actually have like tokens that you can craft things with as well. What was weird on PTR is that these dropped at 500-ish gear score, so I hope that they fixed that aspect, otherwise they're not that valuable yet. But maybe they're also more focusing on open world PvP in the next release, because that's when the major territory fighting overhaul is, so that's probably going to be their focus there. Very cool change for PvP specifically. All the PvP trade skill perk items are no longer bind on pickup. This means that somebody can craft for you. If you're a pure PvPer that doesn't craft themselves, somebody can get your resources and craft with them, either buy them from you or craft for you. So that's a very nice change. I like that. Even though it was an interesting approach to just lock that for PvPers only. The faction store items have been drastically overhauled. I'm not going to go through all of that, but you can see here that the gear score and everything has been adjusted. You still can't 600 these, and they are 2 perkers, so it's still an entry-level thing. But yeah, they are generally more useful for longer, at least, I would say. So we have the new weapons and the new armor, and the armor is all constitution, but you can change that anyway, so it's kind of irrelevant. They have adjusted the prices for stuff like that. They've changed the level requirements and all of that, so things are happening. Then we have the seal prices changed, but they're now buying on pickup, and they can now convert to a single other stat, so you can now get full strength, for example, full int, which is probably more useful for most players, and probably also why they're not doing them at 600 here. I think they're all Resil refreshing still, so probably not the best at the moment, but we'll see what happens to these perks in the expansion as well. And then there are some other things here. So the new faction stores now offer new items for purchase. Each rank sells a mastery guide that can be used to gain experience in gathering skills. Skins for each faction's unique rank 5 armor pieces, so you can have a skin that looks like the PvP armor, so you can have like a Marauder skin, which I think is very cool. I like that a lot. And there's a set of gathering tools have been added to rank 1, and component item that allow multiple major trophies to be crafted in an ultimate trophy. No mention here of any price changes on that one. Curious what price it will drop with. It was very, very expensive. We will find out, but I hope it's a bit lower, because that was a bit crazy. And then there were a lot of complaints about that, and I was one of the people complaining. Look at that, I mentioned it earlier, but it's actually here as well, the PvP loot drops. So they are talking about them a little bit more here. They roll PvP-focused perk buckets. I've already shown you this in a previous video. And they can also appear in elite chests and very rarely as drops from powerful monsters. But mainly this brutish gear, this PvP gear, will drop from open world PvP. Also, there are crafting replicas for them, which are using new materials that can be dropped when killing players in the open world. These new materials can be purchased from faction vendors for faction tokens at rank 4 and 5. They're very expensive to buy from the faction vendor. You will mainly get them from open world PvP, I think, for the most part. So they go into a bit more detail about the PvP reward track here. Again, from level or rank 0 to 20, they've got predetermined options now, bundles and blah blah blah, so that's going to be vastly different. And after that, you get consistent rewards every even, odd, and every 5th level. I don't know what's going on there. But you get named and prestige weapons and armor, umble shards and gypsum orbs, coin, potion, token bundles, any previously non-previously purchased emotes, and all of the new rewards below. So there is a new prestige jewelry, there are new emotes, there are new prestige armor sets, the Grand Dominator, Grand Overseer, and Grand Undertaker, which have interesting perks as well. I've already talked about them. And crafting mods and gypsum casts. So a lot going on here, definitely worth it for new players especially. A lot of these have very good perks relatively consistently, so should be a nice path to go down. The changing perk availability. So perk buckets available on items have been changed. Items will now use a more curated set of perks based on the activity type they are sourced from, generally split between PvE and PvP content types, like for example the ones we just talked about. This prevents items from rolling perk combinations that are unhelpful, such as Lost Ward with Resilient. This is not present on most crafting recipes. The only crafting recipes that use these new buckets are Expedition and PvP replicas. I think this is mainly because they didn't have time to go through everything yet and they're working on an expansion. So that's likely why that's not changed for crafting. So keep in mind, this can still be rolled on crafting. Unless there's another reason for that, but I would imagine it's a time constraint mainly. OPR finally gives more Umbral shards. They didn't actually specify how much though, but I think that's a great change. And equipment given as rewards from War and OPR can now be upgraded to Legendary using Umbral shards. Not sure why they're saying that for OPR, because for OPR was always the case, but yeah. Anyways, War and OPR can now drop armor and weapon crafting patterns. These crafting patterns, you have unique appearances that are basically the same as the unique gear that can drop from these modes. And they have fixed perk for each type from activity. I've talked about them as well. Very interesting patterns as well. Some of them probably fairly useful. They mention arenas here as well, but they already mentioned that in the other part about them, so it's just a duplication here. Corrupted breaches have been changed. So the rewards have been updated. There are now new armor and weapons being dropped by the events. These new items are guaranteed to always roll one family Bane or Ward perk when dropped for players. So at that point you're basically hoping for refreshing and use the appearances from previous corrupted breaches. Some of the corrupted items look really cool, so I hope this is especially the lower tier ones as well. The old armor and weapons no longer drop from these events or have been updated into the new versions. Corrupted breaches can now also drop new elite items for players. These items have an increased chance to roll perks compared to the standard items. These elite items can also be upgraded to legendary using Umbral shards. Some people were already farming corrupted breaches in hopes of getting something good out of this. Again, corrupted breaches can also drop Family Bane Ward perk crafting mods. There's a long list of items that have been changed. You can look at them here. Generally just improvements in perks because a lot of them were not very useful before and some of them are a fair bit better now. The territory bonus percentage has been increased for Morningdale to 7.5% and Weaver's Fen 7.5% because First Light doesn't exist anymore. Artisan gear is now craftable, which is for the most part okay gear, but it's 2 perkers, so it's not really that great. That includes some gathering stuff as well. Some of them are very useful, like for example the gathering tools here. All of these tools feature their corresponding discipline, luck, and yield perks as well as alacrity. So some of them are nice, but depending on how you go, I think this is more of a catch-up mechanic for players that have been playing more recently and haven't been around for that long, because for long-term players you probably can have something better, because they also need a lot of resources at the same time. For example, the Artisan satchel down here. Some of the weapons and shields were very good on PTR though, so we'll see if that is still the case or if they nerfed that one, because that was very, very strong. So you can see here the Artisan satchel is lasting consumption, luck, and Azeroth attuned, as well as a perk from the burden perk bucket. So I think this actually got buffed. I don't think it had the burden perk before. I think it's still maybe not as good as some other options. Again, not quite sure from the top of my head, but you can see same thing here with the Artisan stuff, with the rings and everything. Weaponsmithing, shields. The shields are mentioned here as well. So Arcana, cooking, all the same thing. There is, for cooking in particular, the Artisan's roasted rabbit with seasoned vegetables. Same thing as the normal one, but lasting twice as long. So this is interesting if you're crafting your own food, because you can just use less of that. If you combine that with lasting consumption, it just goes on forever, basically. You can find new rare items when gathering, which gives you gathering trade skill XP. These items are currently available in 3 rarities for mining. I like that they specifically say currently here. So you can see that there's a rarity level missing. So rare, the highest that we have at the moment, is from Orichalcum and Platinum Veins. But you know, There would be a tier above that in terms of resource quality. And that is my main speculation as to why I think we will get a new tier of resources in the expansion. Simply because it's a bit odd that they're scaling the rarity down for the highest tier resource that you can get with Ori. So very curious there, and the currently here is a nice touch, I think. It's a speculation still, but I think the currently is another hint at that once again. And so you can get these resources basically from every gathering trade skill. Fishing is getting a major change just in time basically for the fishing event to come around again. So the celebration zoom doesn't apply for uncommon rare fish anymore. That's a lot less annoying now. They reduced the time to get a nibble when using bait, and buffed the tension recovery for tier 3, 4, and 5 fishing poles. New treasures have been spotted in the waters of Eternum, and many chests have been added, each with a chance for an additional rare reward. So maybe they will actually be useful in some way now. One of these chests contain new armor sets tailored towards fishing. A new fish appeared, or rather, an old fish has made a new appearance. Keep your eyes peeled for fishing while fishing with legendary bait. I'm not quite sure what that is referring to, with an old fish making a new appearance, but oh well. And big anchors can be caught as well. I guess that's going to be a lot of some form of metal if you get them. And then we have another whole batch here with the electric eel, snail, and snail bait are now freshwater baits. Oyster and clam bait are likewise now saltwater baits. Not only does this better suit the taste of the local fish, but also allows adventurers to fish in their favorite spots a little longer. They also have legendary bait now, as well as some crafting cost reduction, and premium bait. So if you're harvesting resources, there's a chance to get a rare version. I we showed you the rare Nightcrawler version of that. They have buffed usage, but they're locked to either day or night. So yeah, you have some limitations here. Crafted premium bait requires some rare ingredients, so be mindful of anything weird that might be discovered in the new treasure chests. So I guess that's one of the reasons to get the treasure chest now, and then the bait can be used to get better fish or something. These premium baits give a huge buff and are not locked to day and night. So a lot going on here. And also, fish is elsewhere. So fish have scattered all over Eternum and now find themselves in different homes. Redistributed each territory's fish population to better balance the value of each territory's fishing pool, so that all territories have something exciting. Some territories are still tailored towards a certain type of experience. Sturgeon and sculpin are now catchable in freshwater and saltwater. Frogfish is now only catchable in saltwater. Legendary fish also have new home territories, but there's now a chance to catch any legendary in any territory. So there's a lot of value in just farming fish with a lot of fishing luck of various kinds to get legendaries, but there's also a lot of potential for switch-arounds, and our newer database, they didn't have the information yet where the new fish is now, so we'll find out what's where. It's just gonna be a fun time for fishing. Gypsum crafting now has a legendary gypsum cast, and this always gives a legendary item, and they're used you use 5 gypsum casts to craft them, as well as 1000 umbral shards. You don't get any umbral shards when you open them though, so pretty significant cost there to guarantee the legendary. Along with that, they adjusted the attribute perks applied to gypsum cast gear to optimize towards the preferred item stats. So for example, spears will likely have decks and stuff like that. So it can be good in some regards. Doesn't work that well for jewelry and armor. As part of the health and stamina increases, the town projects Hale and Hardy and Stalwart have been removed, but they don't mention the stamina increase anywhere else as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware at least. So this is a bit confusing how that's been worded. So maybe you get the stamina increase, maybe you don't. We'll find out. Some items have been re-added as drops. I don't really know what the deal with those ones is. They're weird. I looked at them. It didn't really make sense to me. It might just be a cosmetic purpose there. The heal no longer drops loot every time you kill it in the forge, only the last time. Old trinkets have been renamed to exemplary trinkets, and the tier 5 Aethos staff is now legendary, so that you can have a full legendary inventory and gear set. And if you run a lot of con, if you're a tank, don't worry, Hale and Hardy does not work properly with that as well, or rather, the added scaling that we have instead of Hale and Hardy. There are more tasks for the new season journey, so you can kind of do more of what you want to do. And there are a bunch of new activities added to the activity card, which also got an addition to the tasks in general. You have 3 tasks from each category at least, and you also have 21 tasks per list, up from 16. So you're a lot more flexible in how you can grind the season pass, and a lot of these are very easy to do. The Dune Walkers are everywhere in Brimstone and stuff like that. So yeah, they want to focus this on Brimstone, but a lot of it's fairly easy. The journey also gives some more season XP, which I think is great, so there's more value in actually completing the journey instead of just flipping cards. And they increase the experience given from season challenges from 3,500 to 4,500 to challenge. And we have a couple of fixes to the season pass here, a couple of visual fixes and general notable fixes. We also have tooltip fixes, which mention something about the focus, and I think they changed something about focus, giving higher fish quality now or something, or higher fishing luck, instead of the line tension, which didn't work. It's not mentioned here though, so they probably honestly just forgot it. There's something very good hidden in the quality of life features here. We have some map filters now, which is nice, but we have the player requested feature here to be able to search for perks and gems in the inventory. You can search a bunch of stuff with that, I've already showed you, but very, very useful tool. Companies now must have at least 25 members to declare on a territory. They're explaining the reasoning there, but not that important for us. And while in a group, you can now choose a role. You can already do that technically, but on the left side, under your group icons, you can click on 3 dots and you can select your role. Something that's going to be very useful, especially for the raids that we have now. So do that. We have a bunch of audio fixes here and some dialogue fixes or additions. And they added a new section here, which I like, which are just general known issues. It's not all the issues they know, but some annoying ones. So one of them is players missing all titles and achievements, or online friends not refreshing properly. And then one that I specifically want to point out, because some of you may be playing this, players can experience 5 to 10 minutes of loading when going into and out of the egg chamber during the season's quest Empty Nest. Very unfortunate they couldn't fix that one before the season quest comes out. If you're experiencing this, what I did, I just closed my game and restarted my game, and then I got out of it immediately. So I'm guessing that's the best way to deal with that, but it is worth keeping in mind that this can happen. This is towards the end of the quest line, but you can get stuck in there, and yeah, they know about it, but weren't able to fix it yet. And also, you are able to swap individual gear pieces, but not gear sets in 3v3 arenas, which is weird and very annoying. So tons and tons going on here, and that's not nearly all that we need to talk about. Again, if you're interested in the Sandworm guide, that is coming later today. I'm going to start working on that right now. And also, if you're interested in the Spear guide, in the SNS guide, and all the other stuff surrounding Season 2, that's all coming in the next days. I will talk to you about how I think Season 2 is in general, based on my PTR experience and all that. I didn't expect it to come quite so soon, so I'm gonna have to play some catch-up. And if you want to see more than just that, like for that part, obviously subscribe. But if you want to see more than that, at Twitch TV/DukesLoth, I'm going to be streaming our attempts of the Sandworm raid. We did pretty well on PTR, and then they buffed the Sandworm massively. We haven't been able to try it since, so we'll find out how it goes this time, and if we can actually still defeat it at all. So that should be very fun. Feel free to hop over there. And other than that, thanks to my patrons for supporting this video, and thank you for watching. DukesLoth, out.